On a rain-dark street, a broke bakery worker drags a stranger back to life. She walks away, not knowing the woman she saved is the iron heart of a deadly empire. The next day, the empire knocks on her door. A cold protector, bodyguards, a black card. Then, red dots on glass. Her landlord tries to corner her. And the wolf steps in, a safe house by a silent lake. Rules, cameras, heat. But something's wrong. Photos through the window, a bug in her coat. Someone inside wants her blamed. When enemies snatch the recovering grandmother, the world watches a trap go live. Kneel on camera or lose them both. He's lethal to everyone. To her, he's gentle, until betrayal forces him to choose what he'll burn for her. Why was she targeted the moment she gave that breath? Who inside the house wants her destroyed? And when love becomes the only safe place in a violent world, will she run from the darkness or rule it at his side? The rain drummed against the city streets, each drop casting silver ripples in the pre-dawn darkness. Hazel Quinn's bicycle tires cut through puddles as she pedaled home from another late shift at the bakery, the smell of fresh bread still clinging to her clothes. Her legs burned from the uphill climb, but it was cheaper than the bus. The hazard lights caught her attention first, angry orange blinks reflecting off the wet asphalt. A sleek black town car sat idle, its chrome gleaming under the streetlights. Something made her slow down, instincts from years of night shifts kicking in. That's when she saw her, an elderly woman crumpled on the sidewalk beside the open car door, two men in dark suits hovering uselessly nearby. Hazel's bike clattered to the ground as she sprinted over. The woman wasn't breathing, her elegant clothes soaked through. "Call 911!" Hazel shouted, already dropping to her knees. Her phone was out, dispatcher on speaker as her hands moved with practiced efficiency from checking the airway to starting compressions. "You, get the first aid kit from the car," she barked at one guard. "And you, help me elevate her legs." Her voice carried the no-nonsense authority of someone used to crisis, brooking no argument despite her rain-plastered hair and flour-dusted jacket. The compressions were brutal work, but Hazel didn't stop. "Come on," she muttered, giving 2 rescue breaths before resuming. Finally, beneath her fingers, a flutter. Weak, but there. Relief made her hands shake as paramedics swarmed in with their equipment. The hospital corridors were too bright after the darkness outside. Hazel trailed behind the gurney, giving quick, precise answers about the woman's condition. Only when the intake nurse confirmed stabilization did she step back, edging toward the exit. "Wait, please, let us compensate you," the driver called, reaching for his wallet. But Hazel was already moving, leaving only hastily scrawled fake contact details on a clipboard. Her apartment welcomed her with familiar shadows and the steady drip from that stubborn leak she couldn't afford to fix. Hazel propped her bike against the wall, wincing at the water damage it would leave. Her tip jar yielded barely enough for rent. She counted twice just to be sure, arranging the crumpled bills and loose change into neat piles on her scratched coffee table. The ancient radiator clanked as she fired up her phone's hotspot, sending a quick text to her manager. "Still good for tomorrow night?" She couldn't afford to miss a shift, not with winter coming and her heating bill already a concern. Her stomach growled as she rummaged through nearly empty cabinets. One last packet of instant noodles, dinner of champions. As she waited for the kettle to boil, the TV mumbled in the background. More white noise than entertainment until a particular phrase caught her attention. "Unnamed Good Samaritan credited with saving the life of prominent family matriarch Delphina Vieri early this morning." The news anchor's voice was crisp, professional. Hazel's hand froze on the kettle. Vieri. Even in her working-class neighborhood, everyone knew that name. Her throat went dry as security camera footage played, grainy but clear enough to show her administering CPR. Across the city, in an office where old money met modern power, Massimo Vieri leaned forward in his leather chair, eyes fixed on a bank of high-definition screens. The security footage played on loop, a young woman on her knees in the rain, saving his grandmother's life with steady hands and sharp commands. "Find her!" His voice cut through the room like a blade, making his men straighten instinctively. On screen, he froze the frame on her face, rain-soaked but determined, completely unaware of whose life she'd just saved. "Every camera in a 10-block radius, traffic lights, ATMS, shop security. I want to know everything." The room emptied quickly. his order spreading through encrypted channels and burner phones. Max stayed, watching the footage again. His grandmother was the heart of their family, the steel spine beneath silk scarves and gentle smiles. The thought of how close they'd come to losing her. His fingers tightened on the armrest, knuckles white. The girl had slipped away without taking payment, without even leaving real contact information. Unusual in his experience. People always wanted something from his family. Money, favors, protection. But this one had run from reward like it was a threat. In her apartment, Hazel dozed fitfully in her second-hand armchair, instant noodles forgotten on the counter. Her alarm was set for another night shift, her uniform hanging ready in the bathroom where the steam from her shower might ease the worst wrinkles. 3 floors below, a black SUV idled at the corner, its tinted windows concealing men who photographed every entrance, every window, every detail of her building's aging facade. The rain had stopped, but water still dripped steadily from her ceiling into the pot she'd positioned just so, each drop echoing in the quiet apartment. Hazel shifted in her sleep, one hand still bearing the impression of performing compressions, unaware that her simple act of kindness had caught the attention of the city's most dangerous family. The pounding jolted Hazel from her uneasy sleep, sharp knocks that echoed through her thin apartment door. She stumbled up from the armchair, joints stiff, and peered through the peephole to find Brett Kincaid's fleshy face distorted by the lens. "Open up, Quinn!" Another bang made her flinch. "Rent's due!" Her stomach clenched as she unlocked the door, keeping the chain on. "Mr. Kincaid, I told you I'd have it after my shift tonight." "Not good enough." He wedged his shoulder against the gap, making the chain strain. 3 days late already. You know the rules. Please, I just need until morning. The chain snapped. Brett shouldered in, filling her doorway with his bulk, cheap cologne mixing with cigarette smoke. His eyes raked over her apartment, lingering too long on the bed visible through her open bedroom door. Maybe we can work something out. He stepped closer, backing her against the peeling wall. I'm a reasonable man. There are other ways to pay. I'll have the money tomorrow, Hazel said firmly, trying to edge sideways. First thing. His hand shot out, fingers circling her wrist in a bruising grip. That's not what I want to hear. He yanked her closer, breath hot on her face. You're running out of options, sweetheart. Hazel twisted sharply, breaking his hold. Don't touch me. She backed toward her kitchen, putting the counter between them. I said I'll pay tomorrow. You've got 1 hour before I start eviction paperwork. Brett's face was red now, wounded pride making him mean. Unless you want to discuss alternatives. Get out. Hazel's voice shook but didn't break. Now! He sneered but retreated, slamming the door hard enough to rattle her windows. Hazel sagged against the counter, examining the angry red marks on her wrist. Her hands trembled as she ran cold water over the forming bruise. The second knock was so different she almost didn't register it as knocking. 3 precise taps, measured and controlled. Hazel froze, water still running over her wrist. Miss Quinn? The voice was deep, cultured, nothing like Brett's nasal whine. Hazel dried her hands and approached the door cautiously. Through the broken chain and peephole, she saw an imposing figure in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her yearly rent. 2 other men flanked him, faces expressionless, shoulders broad under black jackets. Massimo Vieri, the man from the news, the grandson of the woman she'd helped. Her throat went dry. May I come in? He didn't phrase it as a question exactly. Hazel's mind raced. Refusing seemed unwise, but her apartment... God, the leak, the shabby furniture, the dishes in her sink. Yes, of course. She opened the door, stepping back. Max entered with fluid grace, his presence making her tiny kitchen seem even smaller. His men remained in the hallway, silent sentinels. Miss Quinn. He set a thick envelope on her scratched table. I wanted to thank you personally for what you did this morning. My grandmother is recovering well, thanks to your quick action. I'm glad she's okay. Hazel stayed by the counter, unconsciously tugging her sleeve over her wrist. Anyone would have helped. No. His voice was soft but certain. They wouldn't have. My family owes you a debt. He moved with careful precision, like a large predator, aware of its own strength. His eyes missed nothing: the water damage on her ceiling, the ancient appliances, the way she held herself slightly defensive. When she shifted, her sleeve rode up, exposing the fresh bruising. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Max's expression didn't change, but something lethal flickered in his eyes as they fixed on her wrist. "That's recent?" "Not a question." "It's nothing." Hazel tugged her sleeve down. "Really?" He reached into his jacket, movements deliberate, and withdrew a matte black card. The surface caught the light strangely, revealing no text or numbers. He placed it on the table with the same precision he did everything else. "If you need anything at all, call." His voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Day or night. I appreciate the offer, but I can't accept." The money or the card? A slight smile touched his mouth, gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "Take both. Use neither if you choose, but keep them." He straightened, adjusting cuffs that probably cost more than her monthly grocery budget. "Thank you again, Miss Quinn. My grandmother would like to meet you properly when you're comfortable." Hazel managed a nod, relief flooding her as he moved toward the door. His men fell into step without a word exchanged. She waited until their footsteps faded before sagging against her counter. The envelope sat innocent and threatening on her table, promising solutions she wasn't sure she wanted. A flicker caught her eye, the ancient wiring acting up again. But when she glanced at her window, she saw something else: a small red dot dancing briefly across the glass before disappearing. Probably kids with laser pointers, she told herself. The dot reappeared, traced a deliberate line, and vanished. Her hands shook slightly as she picked up the black card. It felt heavy, expensive. Real steel, not plastic. No contact information visible, but she was certain it would work if she needed it. She wouldn't need it. Hazel tucked the card into an empty coffee mug by her sink, pushed the envelope into her sock drawer, and grabbed her work uniform. The bakery waited, familiar and safe with its warm ovens and simple problems. She'd figure something out. She always did. The card would stay in its mug, unused and unneeded. She repeated this to herself as she locked her door, as she headed down the grimy stairs, as she stepped into the evening air that carried the first hints of autumn chill. The fluorescent lights flickered in the stairwell as Hazel trudged up to the third floor, paper bag of day-old pastries cradled in her arms. Her shoulders ached from hours of kneading dough, but Mrs. Chen on the second floor had been sick, and the Rodriguez kids always lit up at the sight of chocolate croissants. A shadow moved at the landing. Brett Kincaid stepped out, blocking her path. "Working late again, sweetheart?" His cologne was too strong in the confined space. "About that rent payment." "I gave you what I had." Hazel clutched the bag tighter. "The rest comes next week." Or, Brett invaded her space, pressing her against the wall. "We could work something out now. Be sweet to me, and maybe I forget about the missing half." Hazel's throat closed. The stairwell suddenly felt very small, very dark. She opened her mouth to yell. A deeper shadow materialized behind Brett. In the dim light, Massimo Vieri looked like something carved from marble and steel. "Mr. Kincaid." Max's voice filled the space, quiet but absolute. "I believe we need to discuss the changing ownership situation." Brett spun, paling. "What? Who? This is private property." "Was private property." Max held up his phone, displaying legal documents. "As of 4 hours ago, the mortgage has been transferred to Vieri Holdings. My lawyer is waiting outside with the deed." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "There will be no more negotiations in stairwells." "You can't," Brett's voice cracked. "This building is mine." "Check your accounts. The buyout is quite generous." Max's tone suggested this generosity might evaporate. "I recommend signing quickly." Brett glanced between them, mouth working. Then he bolted down the stairs, nearly tripping in his haste. Hazel sagged against the wall, heart hammering. "I didn't ask for this." "You didn't have to." Max stepped closer, concern flickering across his features. "Are you—" The night exploded. Glass shattered as automatic fire raked the building's front. Screams erupted from multiple floors. Max moved with terrifying speed, yanking Hazel behind a concrete support pillar and covering her head with his body. The gunfire seemed endless. "Stay down," he ordered, one hand steady on her back, while the other pulled a phone from his jacket. "Team 2, report. West position compromised. Lock down the perimeter." More glass broke. A child wailed somewhere above them. "We need to move!" Max's voice was tight. "Now! Through the service exit! My neighbors are safer with you gone. They were aiming for my men, but you're a known connection to my family now." He guided her toward a metal door she'd never noticed before. "You're not safe here anymore." An armored SUV idled in the alley, engine purring. Max opened the door, but Hazel hesitated. "I can't just leave." "My job, my apartment." Sirens wailed in the distance. More screams filtered down. Someone was sobbing about blood. "Hazel," Max's voice gentled. "Please, let me protect you until this threat is neutralized." She swallowed hard. "I need to call the bakery." "They depend on me." "Of course, once we're secure." He helped her into the vehicle, sliding in beside her. "I have a safe house, private, guarded, just until we resolve this." The SUV moved smoothly through dark streets, taking random turns. Hazel pressed her forehead against the cool window, watching her neighborhood recede. The bag of pastries sat forgotten in her lap. "Your grandmother," she said suddenly. "Was this because I helped her?" "Partially." Max's jaw tightened. "But these rivals have wanted excuses for months. You were simply visible, connected." They turned onto a private road, trees thick on either side. Iron gates swung open at their approach, guards checking underneath the vehicle with mirrors before waving them through. The safe house sprawled along a quiet lakeshore, motion lights sweeping the manicured grounds as security teams changed shifts. Everything looked expensive, controlled, locked down. The SUV stopped at a side entrance with reinforced doors. Hazel stared at the heavy bolts, reality sinking in. Her tiny apartment with its leaky ceiling felt very far away. Her simple life of early mornings and fresh bread had shattered like the windows of her building. She couldn't go back. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. Max touched her shoulder, gentle despite his obvious tension. "Let's get you settled. We can make calls, arrange for your things." Hazel nodded numbly, clutching her bag of now crushed pastries as she followed him inside. The door locked behind them with multiple electronic beeps and the sound of metal sliding into place. She thought of Mrs. Chen waiting for her morning delivery, of the Rodriguez kids watching for her from their window, of the rhythm of her hands in dough and the peace of her pre-dawn kitchen. All of it suspended now, maybe lost, because she'd stopped to help someone in the rain. A guard approached with a tablet, murmuring something urgent to Max. He responded in rapid Italian, expression darkening. The lakeside house suddenly felt less like sanctuary and more like a cage, albeit a gilded one. "I know this isn't what you wanted," Max said quietly, "but I promise you'll be safe here." Safe, Hazel thought, but not free. She watched another security team sweep the perimeter, their weapons visible under jacket lights. The night pressed against bulletproof windows, and somewhere in the city, her old life burned away in a hail of gunfire meant for someone else. Morning light streamed through the sunroom's floor-to-ceiling windows, turning the space into a crystal cage. Hazel tugged at the borrowed sweatshirt that hung loose on her frame, feeling out of place among the pristine white furniture and ornate rugs. "Come, Cara." Delfina Vieri beckoned from her position on a plush chaise, oxygen cannulas trailing beneath her elegant shawl. "Join me for tea." Hazel approached cautiously, noting how the morning sun caught the silver in Delfina's hair. A guard positioned himself discreetly by the door. "I want to thank you properly," Delfina said, patting the seat beside her. "Not with money. I can see how you feel about that. But with something more valuable. Stories." "Stories." Hazel settled onto the edge of the chaise. Delfina's eyes sparkled as she poured tea into delicate cups. "Did you know I met my Giuseppe at a spring festival? He was selling lemons of all things. The most beautiful lemons you've ever seen." Her voice carried them to sun-drenched Italian markets, to a young man with clever hands and a crooked smile who built an empire from a fruit cart. She wove tales of first dances and hard choices, of learning when mercy cost more than violence. "The trick, Cara," Delfina said, studying Hazel with keen interest, "is knowing which price you can live with paying." Hazel noticed the untouched cookies beside Delfina's tea. "You should eat something with your medicine. Tea without bread is practically criminal." Delfina's laugh was warm and surprised. "Is that so?" "Absolutely." "I would know. I'm a baker." Hazel glanced at the guard. any chance of getting some fresh rolls?" The guard's stoic expression cracked slightly as he touched his earpiece. Within minutes, a basket of warm bread appeared. A sound from the doorway drew Hazel's attention. Max stood there, something soft and wondering in his expression as he watched his grandmother laugh, really laugh, while Hazel demonstrated the proper way to butter a roll. "Massimo," Delphina called, "come taste what your men found. Our Hazel says the bread is acceptable, though not as good as hers." The moment Max stepped into the sunroom, his phone buzzed. His face hardened as he looked at the screen. Without a word, he strode to the windows, scanning the grounds with predatory focus. "What is it?" Hazel asked. Max's jaw clenched as he turned his phone to show her. A photo of herself, backlit through these very windows, time-stamped 20 minutes ago. Someone had been watching. "Change of plans," his voice was steel. "We're moving you deeper inside." The next hour passed in a blur of increased security. Guards swept the perimeter, while Max personally escorted Hazel to a bedroom in the house's core. The space was lovely, all cream and gold with a lake view, but the adjoining guard post made it feel more like a fortress than a sanctuary. "The rules are simple," Max said, standing close enough that Hazel could smell his cologne. "No going outside without escort, no approaching windows. You'll have a dedicated phone for secure communications. Curfew is sunset." "I'm not a child," Hazel snapped. "I don't need a bedtime." "What you need is to stay alive." His hand lifted, almost touching her cheek before dropping away. "From now on, you don't breathe without me knowing." Heat rushed to Hazel's face. Anger, she told herself. Not the way his presence seemed to fill the room or how his protectiveness stirred something dangerous in her chest. "And how long am I supposed to live like this?" "Until I eliminate the threat." His eyes softened fractionally. "I know this isn't easy, but please, work with me." Hazel crossed her arms, hating how her skin prickled with awareness of him. "I need to contact my boss." Max nodded to a sleek phone on the nightstand. "Secure line. Limited contacts, but your workplace is programmed in." Left alone, Hazel sank onto the bed's edge. Her fingers shook slightly as she typed out a message to her manager. "Family emergency. Need some time off. Will update soon." The lie felt bitter, but what could she say? "Sorry, I'm trapped in a mafia safe house because I saved the wrong grandmother." She set an alarm for a short nap, exhaustion from the previous night finally catching up. Through the open door, she could see the guard taking his position, weapon visible under his jacket. The bed was sinfully comfortable, nothing like her lumpy mattress at home. Hazel curled onto her side, watching sunlight paint patterns on the wall. In the distance, she could hear Max's voice giving orders, the stamp of boots as security rotated, the quiet beep of surveillance equipment. She thought of her tiny apartment, probably still cordoned off as a crime scene, of her bicycle, abandoned in the stairwell, of the simple life she'd built, where the biggest threat had been a creepy landlord and late rent. Now she was caught in something larger, darker, a world where tea with a grandmother came with armed guards, where kindness could get you killed, where a man's gentle eyes contradicted his capacity for violence. Hazel's phone buzzed with her manager's reply. "Take the time you need. Your job's secure." At least one piece of her old life remained intact. She set the phone aside and closed her eyes, trying not to think about Max's almost touch or the way Delphina had looked at her, like a puzzle piece finally clicking into place. The guard shifted outside her door, a constant reminder of her new reality. Hazel pulled the plush comforter tighter, setting her jaw. She might be trapped here, but she refused to be afraid. Of the threats outside, or the feelings stirring within. The kitchen island gleamed under pendant lights as Max spread out a blueprint of the property. His finger traced escape routes while his voice carried the weight of command. Main gate requires voice recognition and fingerprint. Secondary exit through the wine cellar. Panic room behind the library bookcase. He tapped specific points. In case of breach, you'll hear 3 short alarms. Head to the nearest safe zone marked here. Hazel studied the map, memorizing paths but refusing to let fear rule her. "I have conditions too." Max's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Conditions?" "I won't be locked away like some possession." She met his gaze directly. "I need to know when there's real danger." "No sugar-coating threats to keep me calm and—" She straightened her spine. I'm going to keep baking for your grandmother every morning. Absolutely not. The kitchen has too many entry points. Delphina needs proper nutrition to recover. Fresh bread, not store-bought. Hazel crossed her arms. She barely touched dinner tonight. Max's jaw worked as he weighed security against his grandmother's health. Main kitchen only, armed guard at each door. Deal? Hazel's smile was small but genuine, and something flickered in Max's expression, a crack in his control that seemed to startle him more than gunfire. She turned to the industrial-grade ovens, already planning tomorrow's menu. As she reached for flour, the bag slipped, sending up a white cloud. Hazel laughed, brushing it off her clothes, unaware of the streak across her cheek until Max stepped closer. You have... His thumb swept gently across her skin, removing the flour. Time suspended. Heat blazed where he touched her. Hazel's breath caught as electricity crackled between them, making the air dense with possibility. Max jerked back as if burned, his knuckles white against the counter edge. Rodriguez, he barked at a guard. Reset the patrol rotation, full perimeter sweep every 15 minutes. He strode out, leaving Hazel trembling beside the flour-dusted counter. She pressed her palm to her cheek, still feeling the ghost of his touch. Later that evening, she found Delphina in the conservatory, wrapped in a cashmere shawl as she watched the sunset paint the lake gold. Your grandson, Hazel began, settling into a nearby chair. He terrifies me. Delphina's eyes sparkled with knowing humor. But he also makes me feel... Hazel struggled for words. Safe, steady, which makes no sense given who he is, what he does. Wolves only fear what can wound them, Cara. Delphina patted Hazel's hand. And my Massimo, for all his armor, recognizes in you something that could pierce straight through. Hazel's protest died as Delphina continued. I've watched him build walls since he was a boy. Duty, distance, control. You've been here 2 days, and already those walls crack when you smile. I'm not trying to crack anything, Hazel insisted. I just want to get through this and return to my life. Perhaps. Delphina's voice held gentle amusement. But life rarely gives us what we want. Instead, it gives us what we need. While they talked, Max sequestered himself in his study with satellite maps and intelligence reports. Coffee grew cold beside him as he built a profile of their likely enemy. Rinaldo Corsetti, old-school Don, who'd sneered at Max's attempts to legitimize certain family operations, who'd called Max soft for refusing to traffic humans or exploit children, who'd lost face when Max's reforms gained traction with younger crews. The attempt on his soldier hadn't been random. It was a message, adapt or die. And now Hazel, brave, principled Hazel, who'd saved his grandmother without thought of reward, was caught in the crossfire. Max's pen snapped in his grip. If Corsetti wanted war, he'd learn why the Vieri name still commanded respect. But first, Max had to ensure Hazel's safety. Had to ignore how her presence made him feel almost human again. The sky lightened toward dawn as Hazel finished a batch of croissants. She'd insisted on starting early, wanting them fresh for Delphina's breakfast. Now exhaustion tugged at her as she curled on the living room couch, intending just a brief rest. Max found her there minutes later. She'd fallen asleep sitting up, head tilted at an angle that would hurt when she woke. Without conscious thought, he retrieved a soft blanket from the hall closet. As he draped it over her, she shifted slightly, murmuring something unintelligible. Max froze, suddenly aware of how close he stood, how peaceful she looked in sleep. His hand hovered near her hair before he forced it back to his side. Beyond the property's high fence, in the pre-dawn shadows of the tree line, a camera lens captured the moment in perfect silence. Max stepped away from the couch, unaware of being watched. His focus remained on Hazel, on the strange ache in his chest that grew stronger with each passing hour, on the growing certainty that protecting her had become about more than repaying a debt. She was changing things inside his fortress, inside him, and for the first time in years, Max wasn't sure his carefully constructed walls would hold. The morning sun glinted off the lake as Max led Hazel and Delphina toward the private pier. Guards flanked them, alert but discreet in their dark suits. Delphina had insisted on fresh air, declaring that fear of dying is no reason to stop living. Hazel breathed in deeply, savoring the crisp air. The wooden planks creaked beneath their feet as they walked toward the pier's end. Max's hand hovered near her lower back, not quite touching, but ready to guide or protect. A delivery boat approached, its white hull cutting through the calm water. Max's posture shifted subtly, a predator sensing wrong. The boat's angle was off, too sharp, too purposeful. "Down!" Max's command cracked through the air as men burst up from the boat's cabin, weapons raised. Hazel dove behind a thick wooden piling as gunfire exploded across the pier. Through the chaos, she glimpsed Max in motion. Deadly, efficient, beautiful in his violence. He fired 3 precise shots, each finding its mark. When a groundskeeper froze in panic, Max executed a fluid roll, tackling the man behind cover as bullets splintered the wood where he'd stood. "Protect the elderly." Max's order sent 2 guards moving Delphina to safety, while others returned fire. The firefight was brief but intense. The attackers retreated, their boat lurching away, all except one who lay wounded on the pier, his gun kicked aside by Max's men. Hazel's ears rang in the sudden quiet. She watched Max bark orders, his face carved from stone as he directed the cleanup. The wounded attacker was dragged away for questioning, and though no one spoke of what would happen next, the cold efficiency in Max's eyes told its own story. Hours later, Hazel found Max in a utility room off the kitchen. He stood at a deep sink, scrubbing blood from his hands with mechanical focus. His fingers trembled slightly, delayed adrenaline crash making itself known. Without speaking, Hazel took a clean dish towel from a nearby shelf. She approached slowly, telegraphing her movements, and reached for his hands. He allowed her to wrap them in the soft cotton, his breath uneven. "People born gentle can learn to bite," she murmured, carefully drying each finger. "But people born biting must learn where to rest." Max's laugh was more exhale than sound. "These scars," he flexed his fingers within her grip, showing white lines across his knuckles. "Old knives." Older oaths. "I swore to kill for those I love." His voice roughened. "And I keep my promises." Hazel's breath caught at the word love, at how naturally it fell from lips more used to giving orders than confessions. Her thumbs traced his palms, feeling the strength there, the capacity for both violence and tenderness. "Your hands are steady now," she observed softly, "because you're holding them." The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. Max finally stepped back, clearing his throat. The man talked, confirmed it was Corsetti. "The one who hates your reforms?" Max nodded, jaw tight. "He thinks mercy makes us weak. That modernizing our operations betrays tradition." He gave a sharp laugh, as if tradition means we can't evolve. The rest of the day passed in controlled tension. Hazel channeled her anxiety into cooking, preparing a rich chicken broth that would help Delphina recover from the morning's shock. The elderly woman had weathered the excitement with remarkable composure, though Hazel noticed she held her rosary more often. Max spent hours reviewing security footage and escape routes with his team. Through the kitchen window, Hazel watched guards reinforce the damaged section of fence where bullets had torn through the metal. The property felt both fortress and trap, safety and cage intertwined. As sunset approached, Hazel needed air. She stepped onto the wraparound porch with a mug of tea, breathing in the evening quiet. A flash of light caught her eye, something in the bushes, reflecting the dying sun. Moving closer, she found a broken camera, its cheap glass eye shattered, but its presence confirming what they'd feared. Someone had breached the perimeter again to plant surveillance. Her hands shook as she picked up the device. In the growing dusk, its broken lens seemed to mock their illusion of security. The enemy was watching, waiting, learning their patterns, and sooner or later, they would strike again. "Max," she called softly, knowing he was never far. The sound of his approaching footsteps was immediate, solid, grounding. He took the camera from her hands, examining it with cold focus. His other hand came to rest on her shoulder, warm and steadying. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The message was clear. The walls around them might be high, but they weren't impenetrable. Inside, Delphina's voice carried from the sitting room as she said evening prayers. Guards moved and practiced patterns around the property's perimeter, and in the space between Hazel and Max, something shifted. Trust and tension, fear and fierce protection, all tangled together in the growing dark. The camera was a reminder that danger stalked their edges. But Max's hand on her shoulder, the warmth of his presence at her back, told a different story, that sometimes safety wasn't found in walls, but in the people willing to guard them. Morning light slanted through the safe house windows as Hazel sorted through a stack of mail forwarded from her old apartment. Her fingers stilled on a thick envelope bearing the county courthouse seal. Inside was a summons. Brett Kincaid was suing her for damages and unpaid rent, all fabricated claims meant to smoke her out into public record. Max's jaw tightened as he read over her shoulder. "You're not going." "I'll send lawyers." "I am going," Hazel said firmly, squaring her shoulders. "If I can face bullets on a pier, I can face that small, petty man in a quiet room. It's different. The courthouse is exposed, and I refuse to hide." Hazel met his gaze steadily. "This is my life he's trying to steal. My voice needs to be heard." From her armchair by the window, Delphina lowered her book. "The girl is right, Nipote." "Sometimes the strongest defense is showing up." Max paced, radiating tension. "At least let me bring a full security detail." "2 guards, Delphina countered, her tone brooking no argument. "Plus Antonio driving. We'll take the sedan. Less conspicuous than your usual parade of black SUVs. An hour later, they wound through back streets toward the courthouse. Hazel sat between Max and Delphina in the back seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The bruises on her wrist had faded, but she'd photographed them that first day. Evidence of Brett's true nature. The courthouse lobby bustled with morning traffic. Their small group moved efficiently through security, the guards positioning themselves at subtle angles while appearing casual. In the narrow hallway outside the courtroom, Brett's eyes widened at seeing Hazel flanked by Max Vieri's presence. He quickly looked away. Inside, the hearing proceeded with bureaucratic efficiency. Brett's lawyer presented a laughable list of damages. Broken fixtures Hazel had never touched, months of rent she'd already paid. When Hazel took the stand, her voice remained steady as she described Brett's pattern of harassment, the favors he'd suggested in lieu of rent, the bruising grip that left marks. "And do you have documentation of these injuries?" the judge asked. Hazel nodded, and Max's lawyer presented the photographs. Clear images of finger-shaped bruises around her wrist, time-stamped the day of the incident. The lawyer then produced a stack of rent receipts and maintenance requests that systematically dismantled Brett's claims. The judge took only minutes to dismiss the case, adding a stern warning about filing frivolous lawsuits and suggesting Brett might want to review tenant harassment laws. Relief flooded through Hazel as they exited the courthouse into the morning sun. She inhaled deeply, savoring the simple victory of truth over intimidation. Delphina squeezed her arm in quiet approval. The peace shattered in an instant. A motorcycle's engine screamed as it jumped the curb. The rider, clad in black, swerved through pedestrians and made a grab for Hazel's purse, the strap caught, yanking her forward before snapping. Inside that purse was the safe house key on its chain and the dedicated phone Max had given her, direct lines to their security. Max's men reacted instantly, one shoving Hazel and Delphina toward the courthouse doors while the other sprinted for their vehicle. The motorcycle weaved through traffic, Max's security car in close pursuit. "Inside now," Hazel urged, supporting Delphina as they retreated to the lobby. Her hands shook as she pulled out her personal phone, calling Antonio to bring the sedan around to the secure entrance. Those 10 minutes of waiting felt eternal. Hazel positioned herself between Delphina and the doors, hyper-aware of every movement around them. The elderly woman maintained her composure, though her fingers worked her rosary beads with swift precision. Footsteps approached. Max's distinctive stride. He appeared in the lobby, slightly disheveled, knuckles scraped raw. In his hands were Hazel's purse and the key, still on its chain. "Here." His voice was rough as he pressed them into her grip. Their fingers tangled, and he didn't let go. "I can't lose you." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning beyond simple protection. Hazel's breath caught at the raw honesty in his eyes, the way his thumb brushed over her pulse point where Brett's bruises had once marked her skin. Delphina watched them with knowing eyes, a slight smile playing at her lips. "Perhaps we should return home," she suggested gently. "I believe we've had enough excitement for one morning." The ride back was quiet, charged with unspoken things. Max kept his hand near Hazel's on the seat between them, not quite touching, but close enough to feel the warmth of her skin. His phone buzzed occasionally with updates from his men still tracking down leads on the motorcycle incident. Hazel watched the city scroll past, mind spinning. She'd stood her ground against Brett's intimidation, refused to be cowed by his attempts to control her through legal channels. Yet now she faced a different sort of surrender. not to fear or force, but to the growing certainty that her life had irreversibly entwined with Max's dangerous world. His words echoed in her mind, "I can't lose you." Simple words that carried the weight of everything he'd left unsaid. The fierce protectiveness, the growing tenderness, the way he looked at her like she was something precious and wild that he desperately wanted to keep safe but never cage. The safe house appeared ahead, its high walls both barrier and sanctuary. As they passed through the gates, Hazel felt Max's fingers finally close over hers, a touch as gentle as his earlier words had been raw. She turned her hand beneath his, their palms meeting, and felt the scrapes on his knuckles, battle wounds from defending what was his. The car idled in the safe house driveway, engine ticking, while Max stared at his scraped knuckles. The silence stretched taut until something in him snapped. He turned to Hazel with desperate intensity, cupped her face in his calloused hands, and kissed her like a man drowning. The kiss was both brutal and reverent, all his carefully maintained control shattering against the soft give of her lips. His thumbs traced her cheekbones as if memorizing their shape. Then reality crashed in, and he jerked back, horror flooding his features at crossing the line he'd sworn to respect. But Hazel followed, her fingers curling into his jacket lapels. She kissed him back with deliberate certainty, erasing his doubt. When they finally broke apart, their breaths mingled in the close space of the back seat. "I need you to understand something," Hazel said softly. "I've counted pennies for years, skipped meals to keep the heat on in winter, worked doubles until my feet bled." She met his gaze steadily. "I won't be bought." "Not by Brett, not by anyone." Max traced the curve of her jaw with trembling fingers. "These past nights," he confessed, voice rough, "I've watched over your sleep. Wanted to give you one night without fear." His eyes were vulnerable in a way that transformed his whole face. "Just one." Delphina was waiting in the dining room when they entered, a knowing smile playing at her lips as she studied their charged silence. Bowls of minestrone steamed on the table, thick with vegetables and tiny pasta stars. She stirred her soup with deliberate patience, every bit the satisfied strategist watching pieces fall into place. "The courthouse air must have given you both an appetite," she observed mildly, though her eyes sparkled with hidden mirth. Hazel felt heat climb her cheeks as she sat down, hyper-aware of Max taking the chair beside her. His knee brushed hers under the table, and neither moved away. The soup was rich and warming, but Hazel barely tasted it, lost in the phantom pressure of his lips, the lingering scent of his cologne. The afternoon unfolded in domestic tension. Hazel retreated to the kitchen, losing herself in the familiar rhythm of measuring and mixing. The mechanical precision of baking helped steady her hands. Still trembling from that kiss, she could hear Max's measured footsteps pacing the hallway outside, coordinating with his security team through clipped phone calls. Guards rotated shifts with military precision, checking in and out through the reinforced side door. The routine felt almost normal until one of the tech specialists appeared in the kitchen doorway, face grim. "Sir," he called to Max, "we found something." In his palm lay a tiny electronic device, no bigger than a button battery. It was sewn into the lining of Ms. Quinn's borrowed coat. Professional job, likely planted during the courthouse chaos. Max's expression hardened to granite as he examined the bug. Full staff audit, now. I want schedules, rotations, background checks, everything. His voice carried the kind of quiet that preceded violence. And sweep every piece of clothing, every room, every vehicle. Hazel's stomach dropped as puzzle pieces clicked into place. The strange glints she'd caught in the tree line, that feeling of being watched, the broken camera in the bushes. They weren't random incidents, they were breadcrumbs in a pattern she'd been too close to see. Evening settled over the lake like spilled ink. Delphina retired early, citing fatigue from the day's excitement. Hazel stood at her bedroom window, watching ripples dance across the dark water. The glass reflected her pale face, overlaid against the night beyond. Behind that reflection, she could see the increased patrols circling the property, flashlights sweeping the grounds in precise patterns. A soft knock made her turn. Max filled the doorway, his broad shoulders tense with barely contained energy. Their eyes met in the glass, and something electric passed between them. Want tangled with worry, desire weighted by danger. "Lock it tonight," he said simply, then walked away. His footsteps echoed down the hall, each one measured and controlled, but Hazel heard the fear he wouldn't voice. It vibrated in his jaw, coiled in his shoulders, burned in eyes that couldn't quite meet hers. She touched her fingers to the cool glass, watching the last patrol pass below. The bug in her coat meant someone had been close enough to touch her, to mark her. The thought sent a chill down her spine that had nothing to do with the evening air. Moving to the door, Hazel turned the lock with a decisive click. The sound felt final, like sealing a promise. She pressed her forehead against the solid wood, remembering the desperate way Max had kissed her, as if trying to prove she was real and whole and still within reach. That kiss had tasted of relief and terror and something deeper, something that made her pulse quicken even now. It wasn't just protection he offered anymore, and they both knew it. The game had changed, the stakes rising with every shared glance, every careful touch, every unspoken word. In the quiet of her room, Hazel could hear the house settling around her. Footsteps in the hall as guards changed shifts. The distant hum of security cameras pivoting on their mounts. The soft click of Max's office door opening and closing as he began another long night of vigilance. She changed into borrowed pajamas, slipped between cool sheets, and tried not to think about Max watching over her sleep, keeping the nightmares at bay. But as she drifted off, she could still feel the phantom pressure of his lips, the gentle brush of his fingers against her skin, and the weight of everything they hadn't said. Dawn crept through the study windows as Max's inner circle gathered around a mahogany table scattered with surveillance photos and data logs. The air felt thick with tension, coffee gone cold in forgotten cups. 4 trusted captains flanked their boss, who stood with hands braced on the table's edge, studying the evidence with predator focus. "The pattern suggests patience," said Marco, head of security, pointing to a timeline. "Professional surveillance, strategic probes, not random hits." "A ghost who knows our rhythms," agreed Antonio, weapons master. "Someone with inside access." The door opened with a soft click as Paolo Greco entered, impeccable in a charcoal suit despite the early hour. The consigliere carried a leather portfolio and tablet, his cultured manner a stark contrast to the soldier's blunt practicality. "I've completed my analysis," Paolo said, voice smooth as aged whiskey. He connected his tablet to the room's display screen, and I'm afraid the data points to an uncomfortable conclusion. Security footage from the hospital filled the screen, grainy images of the morning Hazel saved Delfina. Paolo zoomed in on a sequence showing Hazel in the waiting room, phone in hand. "Note the timestamp," he said, 3 minutes after ensuring Signora Vieri was stable, but before departing. The call lasted 47 seconds. Max's jaw tightened. "To whom?" "The number was masked," Paolo replied, "but cross-reference the timing with this." He switched to a diagram tracking signal signatures around the property. Red dots clustered near times and locations, matching Hazel's movements. "The bug found in her coat?" Max's voice held dangerous quiet. "Could have been planted at the courthouse," Paolo acknowledged. "Or it could have been carried in deliberately." The timestamps aligned suspiciously well with her presence. A sharp knock interrupted. At Max's command, the door opened and Hazel entered, confusion turning to wariness as she registered the room's atmosphere. Her eyes caught the surveillance images, widened with recognition. "What is this?" she asked. "Please sit," Paolo gestured to an empty chair. "We need to discuss some concerning patterns." Hazel remained standing. "What patterns?" Paolo replayed the hospital footage. "Can you explain this call?" "I didn't call anyone," Hazel said. "I texted my manager that I'd be late for my shift. Here." She pulled out her phone, opened her message history. "Check the logs yourself." "Easily deleted," Paolo noted. "And the bug in your coat, Are you seriously suggesting I'm working against you?" Color flooded Hazel's cheeks. "After everything, the evidence is circumstantial at best," she cut in, "and twisted to look suspicious. I saved Delfina's life. I left my home, my job, my whole life behind when you said I was in danger. What possible reason would I have to betray that?" "Money," Paolo said softly. "Protection. Freedom from constraints. The motivations are numerous." Max had not moved, his expression carved from stone. "Until we verify the truth," he said, "your movements will be restricted. No phones, no outside contact, no unescorted." "If you're going to cage me," Hazel interrupted, voice shaking but chin high, "at least look me in the eyes when you do it. The room held its breath as Max slowly raised his gaze to meet hers. Something flickered in those dark depths. Pain, doubt, a trust he hated to question. For a long moment, neither looked away. Delphina's arrival broke the standoff. She drifted in like a pale ghost, shawl draped over thin shoulders. "Such heavy hearts this morning," she murmured. "Perhaps we all need clarity." She touched Max's arm. "I would visit the church, nephew. Prayer helps clear the mind." "Nonna, it's not safe." "With proper security," Paolo interjected smoothly. "We could arrange it." "The afternoon is typically quiet, easier to control access. I'll handle the details myself." Max studied his grandmother's face, then nodded shortly. "Triple the usual guard rotation, full sweep before arrival, no civilians except essential staff." By early afternoon, Hazel sat beside Delphina in a hushed pew, watching dust motes dance in colored light from the stained glass windows. Armed men positioned at each entrance scanned constantly, their dark suits incongruous against gleaming marble and ancient wood. The sexton moved quietly between altar candles, flame touching wick in gentle ritual. Incense hung sweet in the air. For a moment, Hazel could almost forget the morning's accusations, the walls closing in, the trust fracturing like ice in spring. But the weight of watching eyes remained. The guards, Paolo's occasional glance from his position near the door, and somewhere in the city beyond, whoever pulled the strings that had brought them here. Hazel's fingers worried the worn wood of the pew, tracing old scars in the grain. Beside her, Delphina's lips moved in silent prayer, rosary beads clicking softly between aged fingers. The older woman's presence felt steady, an anchor in the storm. When she reached for Hazel's hand, her grip was surprisingly strong, as if trying to communicate something beyond words. Sunlight shifted across the altar as clouds passed outside, shadows and light playing across the ancient stones. The sexton finished his rounds and retreated to the vestibule. In the hushed sanctuary, Hazel could hear her own heartbeat, the whisper of Delphina's prayers, the subtle movements of the guards maintaining their vigil. The peace felt fragile as spun glass, ready to shatter at the slightest touch. But for now, in this moment, between one breath and the next, Hazel let herself be still, let the quiet seep into her bones, let herself forget. Just for a moment, about the invisible noose drawing tight around her neck. The heavy church doors slammed with a thunderous crack. Smoke billowed through the sanctuary, thick and choking. Dark figures stormed down the center aisle, weapons raised. "Down!" a guard shouted, but gunfire had already scattered them. Bullets chipped marble and shattered stained glass. The sacred quiet exploded into screams and chaos. Delphina's hand found Hazel's in the smoke, squeezing tight. "Breathe," she whispered as rough hands grabbed them both. They were dragged through a side door into what looked like a vestry, pushed to their knees on the cold stone floor. Plastic zip ties bit into Hazel's wrists. A phone on a tripod recorded everything. Hazel bound to a wooden chair, Delphina beside her with a blade pressed against her throat. The metal gleamed in the dim light. Rinaldo Corsetti stepped into frame, elegant in his tailored suit. His smile never reached his eyes. "Smile for your boy, ladies. He'll want to see you're still breathing." He adjusted his tie, preening for the camera. For now. The video sent with a quiet ping. Somewhere across the city, Max's phone would be lighting up with their faces. Corsetti leaned close to the lens. "Here's the deal, Massimo. You will abdicate your position, you will kneel before me on a live stream, or you get to watch these lovely ladies die." He traced the flat of the blade along Delphina's jaw. "Your choice." Miles away, Max erupted into motion. "Track that signal," he roared, already moving. "Full tactical team now." His lieutenant worked frantically to trace the video feed, but it bounced through dozens of relays, impossible to pin down. Max reached the church with a skeleton crew, weapon drawn, but the sanctuary held only settling smoke, shattered glass, and scorch marks on ancient stone. A single piece of paper lay on the altar, an address near the docks, where Corsetti's old warehouse still stood abandoned. The city's dusk gathered like bruises in the sky. Max prepared alone, checking weapons with mechanical precision. His hands didn't shake, they never shook anymore, but something raw and desperate lived behind his eyes. In the warehouse, Hazel kept her voice steady, spinning stories to keep Delphina alert. "Remember the sourdough starter you told me about? The one your mother brought from the old country? Tell me again how she kept it alive on the ship." Delphina's voice was weak but clear as she described the careful feeding of flour and water, the smell of fresh bread in a tiny tenement kitchen. The guard nearby snorted in disgust. "You want entertainment?" He pulled out a tablet. "Here's a better story." The screen showed security footage from the safe house. Max and Hazel in the car, that first desperate kiss. The angle was perfect, intimate. Internal cameras, Hazel realized with dawning horror. The traitor had access to everything. "See how deep we got?" The guard grinned. "Nowhere to hide, sweetheart." Full dark fell like a shroud. Hazel's wrists were raw from the restraints, her throat dry with fear. But when Corsetti made his rounds, she forced steel into her spine. "I have a proposal," she said. He paused, amused. "Do tell." "Let Delphina go. After the exchange, I'll walk away from Max. Forever." The words tasted like ash. "You get what you want. His power, his pride. Isn't that better than just killing us?" Corsetti studied her, his smile spreading slow and cruel. "My dear, you understand the game so well." He cupped her chin, ignoring how she flinched. "Breaking a man is so much sweeter when he does it to himself." His fingers dug into her skin. "You have a deal." Delphina made a soft sound of protest, but Hazel wouldn't meet her eyes. Outside, a car door slammed in the darkness. Footsteps approached, measured and deliberate. The warehouse waited, holding its breath. Metal gleamed in the shadows, guns, knives, the edge of future violence. Corsetti's men moved into position, a dozen armed figures melting into the gloom. Time stretched like pulled taffy. Each second dragged with the weight of consequences. Hazel's heart pounded against her ribs, counting down to something inevitable. The zip ties cut deeper as she shifted, trying to keep feeling in her numbing hands. A rat skittered across the concrete floor. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness, a steady metronome of anticipation. The guard with the tablet had moved to the door, weapon ready. Everyone waited for the approaching footsteps to reach their crescendo. Delphina's breathing had grown shallow, but her spine remained straight. Even bound and threatened, she carried herself with quiet dignity. Her eyes never left the warehouse door, as if she could see through the metal to whatever waited on the other side. Hazel's bargain hung in the air between them, unspoken but heavy as lead, the price of survival measured in heartbeats and distance. She tried not to think about Max's face when he would learn of her choice, tried not to remember the way his hands had trembled against her skin. The footsteps stopped. A key scraped in the lock. Metal groaned as the door began to open, spilling yellow streetlight across the threshold like spilled paint. Shadows shifted in the warehouse depths. Weapons lifted, the moment balanced on a knife's edge, waiting to fall. The warehouse door groaned open. Max stepped through alone, his dark coat hanging heavy despite the warm night. His hands rose slowly, deliberately empty, though Hazel could see the subtle bulk of hidden armor beneath his clothes. 2 blocks away, his most loyal soldiers waited in darkness, held back by his direct order. One gunshot would trigger a massacre. Max wouldn't risk it, not with Hazel and Delphina in the crosshairs. Harsh spotlights blazed, illuminating a crude studio setup. 3 cameras on tripods formed a triangle around a spray-painted X on the concrete floor. A laptop streamed the feed live, waiting to broadcast Max's surrender to every family in their circle. Corsetti's men lined the walls, weapons trained steady. Up in the catwalks, more shapes moved like spiders, their rifle barrels glinting. The air tasted of metal and mold and old fear. Hazel's heart stumbled when she met Max's eyes across the warehouse floor. His face was carved from stone, but she saw the muscle jump in his jaw when he spotted the bruise darkening her cheek. She mouthed the word desperately, "Run!" Max's response was immediate, silent but fierce. "Never." He stepped onto the X with fluid grace, coat settling around him. Hazel counted at least 6 knife-shaped bulges worked into the lining. She knew he had more hidden, had seen him dress for war before dawn. "Kneel?" Corsetti's voice carried like a whip crack. He gestured to the main camera. "Swear your abdication? Name me regent of your territory and interests." His smile showed too many teeth. "Make it convincing." Max began to lower himself, movements precise and controlled. But Hazel saw how his eyes swept the room, marking exits, counting guards, calculating angles of fire. He was gathering intel with every centimeter he descended. The camera feeds displayed on the laptop caught Hazel's attention. Something flickered on the highest catwalk, a shadow that didn't match the others. The movement was wrong, too deliberate to be one of Corsetti's thugs. She drew a deep breath and started talking, voice pitched to Carrie. "You're pathetic, Corsetti. Men like you always are, so desperate to steal power because you can't earn it honestly. How many of your own people did you have to bribe to get this far? How many will turn on you the second a better offer comes along?" The head technician, monitoring the stream, scowled. "Shut her up!" "We don't need audio for this part." Two guards peeled away from their posts, heading for her chair with zip ties and duct tape ready. Perfect. The gap in coverage widened, creating a clear line between Max and the pistol on the nearest guard's hip. Corsetti laughed, genuinely amused. "Spirited to the end. I can see why he keeps you round." He turned back to Max. "Continue." Max's knee touched concrete. In the same fluid motion, his wrist snapped forward. A blade appeared as if by magic, burying itself in the nearest guard's thigh. The man screamed, stumbling sideways. As he fell, Max's boot connected with the holstered pistol on his belt. The weapon skidded across the floor, a perfect line drive toward Hazel's chair. The warehouse erupted into chaos. Guards shouted, weapons lifted, boots scraped on concrete. Corsetti barked orders that got swallowed in the noise. The laptop streaming the feed toppled, screen cracking against the floor. Hazel tracked the sliding pistol, muscles coiled beneath her restraints. The guards who'd been approaching her chair spun toward the commotion, giving her a precious second of invisibility. On the catwalk above, that strange shadow was moving again, faster now. Delphina sat perfectly still in her chair, eyes sharp despite her fatigue. She'd gone quiet when Max entered, watching everything with the calculating focus of someone who'd survived decades of similar moments. Now she gave Hazel the smallest nod. Permission, understanding, faith. The pistol hit a groove in the concrete and changed course slightly. Hazel shifted her weight, ready to move. Around her, the warehouse descended further into mayhem as Max rose from his kneel like an uncoiling spring. Another blade appeared in his hand, this one longer, darker. The coat shed its illusion of heaviness, becoming fluid as he moved. He'd planned this, Hazel realized. Every second of apparent submission had been tactical geometry, positioning himself for maximum effect. The guard with the wounded thigh tried to reach for his backup weapon. Max's boot caught him under the chin, sending him sprawling. More shouts, more weapons lifting. The camera tripods toppled like dying trees. Corsetti's voice cut through the chaos. "Hold! Everyone hold, or I put a bullet in the old woman's head." But his command came a fraction too late. The pistol reached Hazel's chair just as Max launched into motion. Their eyes met across the warehouse, a moment of perfect understanding. Violence coiled like a spring about to release. Hazel's fingers stretched toward the weapon. Max's blade caught the spotlight, hungry for blood. On the catwalk, the shadow resolved into a clearer shape, waiting for its cue. The warehouse held its breath, balanced on the edge of explosion. Every piece was in position, the gun, the blade, the shadow above. Now they just had to survive what came next. The warehouse exploded into chaos. Hazel's foot connected with the pistol, sending it skittering beneath a nearby crate. Better lost than in enemy hands. Through the mayhem, she caught Max's subtle nod of approval. Metal scraped against metal as Max freed himself, a second blade glinting in his palm. Blood dripped from where the zip ties had cut into his wrists, but his movements were precise, lethal. He became a dark blur of motion, his expensive coat rippling as he engaged the nearest guards. The timing was perfect. Just as Max launched his attack, the warehouse doors burst inward. His loyalists poured through the breach, their entrance covered by the distraction Hazel had created with her defiant speech. Gunfire crackled, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Above them, a sprinkler main ruptured, sending cascades of rusty water raining down. The concrete floor became treacherous, boots sliding as men fought for position. Through it all, Delphina remained remarkably composed, the elderly woman's eyes fixed on a guard who dropped his weapon near her chair. Without hesitation, she snatched up a heavy brass candlestick from the prop altar beside her. When the guard reached for his gun, she brought the makeshift weapon down on his fingers with shocking force. "Young man," she said with aristocratic disdain, "your mother would be ashamed." Smoke grenades hissed, filling the air with gray clouds that mixed with the spraying water. Emergency sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Max moved through the chaos like a shark through bloody water, purpose in every step as he cornered Paolo Greco near the fallen camera equipment. Greco's polished facade cracked. His designer suit was soaked, his carefully maintained hair plastered to his skull. "Max, be reasonable." "Reasonable?" Max's voice carried despite the chaos. "Like when you tried to frame Hazel." "When you sold our security protocols to Corsetti." "The old guard was right about you," Greco spat, backing away. "Too soft. Too willing to change things that worked perfectly well. I deserved." "You deserved nothing." Max advanced, relentless. "You were trusted, given everything, and you betrayed not just me, but her." He jerked his head toward his grandmother. The live stream equipment sparked and sputtered, sending distorted images across the fallen screens. Fragments of violence flickered through static. Max's blade, Greco's desperate lunge, a final justice delivered with surgical precision. Then the feeds died completely, plunging that corner into darkness. Hazel stood in the aftermath, water dripping down her face, wrists bleeding where she'd fought the restraints. Her legs trembled with delayed shock. Max crossed to her in 3 long strides, blade slicing through her bonds. His hands were gentle as he helped her stand, a stark contrast to the violence they'd just delivered. "You don't get to leave," he said, voice raw with emotion. "You're mine." Hazel lifted her chin, meeting his intensity with her own. "Possession is easy," she challenged. "Partnership is earned. Prove to me I'm not just another hostage. Prove I'm more than something else you own." For a moment, Max went perfectly still. Then, there in the wreckage of Corsetti's ambition, he lowered himself to one knee. Not in submission to an enemy, but in dedication to her. Water pooled around his expensive shoes, his coat heavy with it. "Your rules," he promised. "In our private life, your rules govern everything, I swear it." The sincerity in his voice made Hazel's breath catch. This was no tactical move, no power play. This was truth, offered freely. Sirens screamed closer. Max's men swept the warehouse's corners, securing the last pockets of resistance. Corsetti was gone, fled in the chaos, but that was a problem for another day. Right now, extraction was priority. "Hurry, children!" Delphina called, her voice quavering but imperious. She stood supported by 2 guards, candlestick still clutched in one hand. "Unless you'd like to explain all this to the police." They moved as one unit toward the exit, Max's arm steady around Hazel's waist. An armored SUV idled in the alley, engine purring. The driver held the door as they climbed in, Delphina first, then Hazel, then Max. As they pulled away, Hazel's exhaustion finally caught up. She let her head rest against Max's shoulder, feeling the solid strength of him. Delphina's hand found her knee, squeezing gently. 3 survivors, connected by choice now, not just circumstance. The city's lights slid past the bulletproof windows, smeared by rain and speed. Signs and street lamps blurred into rivers of color. Inside the car, the silence held peace instead of tension. They were alive. They were together. For now, that was enough. Max's arm tightened around Hazel's shoulders, and she felt him press a kiss to her temple. His heartbeat was steady under her ear, already calmed from the fight. Beside them, Delphina hummed an old Italian lullaby, something about storms and safe harbors. Water dripped from their clothes onto the leather seats. Bruises were beginning to bloom, and tomorrow would bring 1,000 complications. But here, in this moment, they had won. Not just survival, but something rarer. Truth between people who chose each other despite every reason not to. Dawn painted the lakeside house in gentle strokes of gold, transforming what had once been a fortress into something warmer. The past 4 weeks had changed more than just the building. In the first week after the warehouse, Hazel had taken charge of security upgrades with the same precision she used for measuring ingredients. She'd insisted on transparency, installing cameras that fed to monitors she personally checked each morning. The old system, compromised by Greco's betrayal, was stripped out and replaced with equipment even Max's tech team approved of. "If we're going to be safe," she'd told Max while reviewing blueprints, "we're going to do it my way." The second week brought legitimacy to Hazel's work. She'd registered Lakeside Provisions, LLC, a front-facing bakery business that supplied fresh bread and pastries to carefully vetted cafes across the city. The invoices were clean, the paperwork impeccable. Even the health department inspector had smiled at her commercial kitchen setup. Week 3 had seen Max restructuring his organization. The holes Greco had exploited were sealed, loyalties tested and confirmed. Delphina, still recovering but stronger each day, received a dedicated medical team that reported directly to Hazel. The old guard who'd supported Corsetti found themselves quietly retired or relocated. Now, in the 4th week, morning light spilled across Hazel's kitchen counter where dough rose slowly under linen cloths. The scent of yeast and possibility filled the air. Upstairs, Delphina stood before her mirror, fingers trailing over hand-embroidered shawls before selecting one that had belonged to her own mother. Max moved through the house with unusual stillness. His phone, normally an extension of his arm, lay face down on his desk. Today, business could wait. Today was for vows. The garden had been transformed. White chairs formed intimate rows on the manicured lawn. An arch of white roses and ivy marked where they would stand. The guest list was minimal, just the most trusted inner circle and 2 city officials whose loyalty came from respect rather than obligation or threat. Hazel emerged from the house in a cream-colored dress that whispered against marble steps. Max waited beneath the arch, his usual dark suit exchanged for lighter gray that matched the morning sky. His eyes never left her as she walked toward him. Their vows were simple, honest words about protection and partnership. When Max pulled out an envelope, Hazel's eyes widened. Inside were property deeds, her old apartment building, now legally hers to transform. The papers outlined plans for subsidized housing, complete with a legal team dedicated to tenant protection. "No more Bretts," Max promised, his voice carrying to their small audience. "No more predators hiding behind paperwork." Tears spilled down Hazel's cheeks even as she smiled. This wasn't just a gift. It was understanding of who she was, what mattered to her. Champagne flowed afterward, accompanied by honey cake. Hazel had baked the night before. Delphina caught her arm as guests mingled, drawing her close with conspiratorial warmth. "That night," the older woman whispered, "when you found me on the street, I saw the car's lights reflect in your eyes before you reached me. Did you know I told my guards to wait? Just a moment, just long enough to see what kind of woman fate would send?" Hazel's laugh bubbled up through happy tears. "You planned this from the start." "I planned nothing," Delphina said with a wink. "I simply recognized quality when I saw it. Now promise me something? Anything. Fill this house with that laugh of yours for years and years." "I promise," Hazel whispered, hugging her new grandmother close. The day mellowed into evening. Guests departed, leaving behind gift boxes and empty champagne flutes. Delphina retired early, kissing them both on the cheek before her nurse accompanied her upstairs. Near midnight, Hazel stood in her kitchen, their kitchen now, measuring flour for tomorrow's bread. Soft dust clouded the air, catching in the low light like stars. Max's footsteps were silent on the tile, but she felt his presence before his arms slid around her waist. He lifted her flour-dusted hand, pressed his lips to her palm. "Honey," he growled against her skin. "Gunpowder and forever." Hazel turned in his arms, flour marking his dark shirt. "Only if forever keeps its teeth," she answered, voice warm with challenge and promise. Their kiss tasted of honey cake and champagne. Hazel's free hand found the light switch, plunging the kitchen into darkness, broken only by moonlight on the lake beyond their windows. In the silver-painted quiet, they held each other, 2 people who had chosen their fate in each other. The house settled around them, creaking softly like a ship coming to harbor. Security cameras blinked their steady red lights, monitoring empty grounds where no threats lurked. Upstairs, Delphina slept peacefully, her breathing monitored by machines that would alert Hazel first, if anything changed. Everything that had brought them here, a chance encounter in rain-slick darkness, a heart restarting under desperate hands, bullets and betrayal and courage, had led to this moment of perfect stillness. They had built something rare, a love that could be both fierce and tender, protective and freeing. Through the kitchen window, dawn was still hours away. But here in the dark, they had already found their light.